4.3 Writing equations of parallel and perpendicular lines. Parallel lines and slopes. Two lines in the same plane that never intersect are considered parallel lines. Two distinct non-vertical lines are parallel if and only if they have the same slope. All vertical lines are parallel. So vertical lines, remember, are what? They go up and down, correct? Distinct non-vertical lines are lines that might be going with the slope positive or negative. But for those two lines to be the same, parallel, we need to have the same what? Slope. They both need to be have the slope. So if they're negative 4, the other one has to be negative 4. If they're positive 3, they both have to be positive 3. Identifying parallel lines. So in example 1, we have what? 3 lines. We need to determine which of the lines are parallel. If we recall, to find the slope, we need to do the slope formula, which is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. You can also determine your slope if you do y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2. Just remember that it needs to be in order. If you do y1 minus y2, the bottom needs to be x1 minus x2. So let's look for the slope of line A. Line A, we have points negative 4 and 3 and points 1 and 2. So we're going to have an A 2 minus 3 and 1 minus negative 4. 2 minus 3 we know is negative 1, and 1 minus negative 4 gives me positive 5. So that's going to be our slope. In line B, we have what? Negative 1 minus 0 over 1 minus negative 3. 1 minus 0 gives me negative 1. 1 minus negative 3 gives me positive 4. In line C, we're going to have negative 5 minus negative 4 over 2 minus negative 3. Negative 5 minus negative 4 gives me negative 1. And 2 minus negative 3 gives me 5. So parallel lines, we're going to have which ones? A and C are going to be parallel. They're both the same, negative 1/5. Now we're going to writing an equation of parallel lines. I'm giving my points, the 5 and 4, which is 5 and negative 4, x and y. And line parallel. So that means that our lines are going to be parallel. It's important to read the directions. So line 1, we've been given y equals 2x plus 3. If we know that it's going to be parallel, we're finding an equation. Y equals, remember the format, it's going to be slope-intercept. Y equals mx plus b. Do we know our slope for the second line? Yes, which has to be parallel. So remember, parallel needs to have the same what? Slope. So it's going to be 2x. Now we're looking for b, correct? So let's plug in. I'm going to show you 2 different formats to use this. We could use the slope-intercept, which is y equals mx plus b, where y we know is what? Negative 4 equals m, which is our slope, with 2. Our x is 5 times 5 plus b. We compute, which is negative 4 equals 2 times 5 is 10 plus b. We're solving for b, so we're going to subtract negative 10 minus 10 from each side. So we're left with negative 14. So it's going to be minus 14. That's my y-intercept. The other format you could use is the point slope, which is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. We know that we're not solving yet for y, but our y1 is what? -4. But I know -4 minus that negative gives me that minus sign over here, okay? That becomes a +4 equals my m, which is my slope, which is 2 times x, and my x1 is 5, -5. Now I'm going to use distributive property, which is 2x, and then 2 times -5, which gives me -10. I'm going to work out where I'm going to leave y equals in the format. So I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides. I'm left with y equals 2x minus 14. So if you notice, they're both gives you the same answer. You just decide which one you feel most comfortable with. Here we have the core concept of perpendicular lines and the slope. Two lines in the same plane that intersect form a right angle are perpendicular lines. Remember, right are 90 degrees. Right angles are going to be 90 degrees. So you're going to have non-vertical lines are perpendicular if only if their slopes are negative reciprocal. Negative reciprocal means what? Let's say, for example, I have the -2. What is the reciprocal of -2? We know the reciprocal is going to be -1/2. But in perpendicular lines, it's going to be the negative reciprocal, which is -2 going to be a +2. The negative reciprocal. So in other words, what you want to do is always have a positive and a negative slope. Okay? Positive and negative slope in perpendicular lines. Because in perpendicular lines, they form a T. But one on a T, if look at it, one is negative. For example, this blue one here is what? A negative line. And here, the red one is a positive. So that's why one has to be positive and one is negative. That's the best way I could explain to you. It's basically the reciprocal, one positive and one negative. So let's work it out here. Identifying parallel lines and perpendicular lines. Determine which of the line, if any, are parallel or perpendicular. So the first thing we need to look for is for our slope, okay? So in line A, what is the slope in line A? Our slope is 4. What about in line B? Line B, we have it in a standard form, so you need to rearrange your equation to be in the format of y equals mx plus b. Here we're going to have subtract x from both sides, and I'm left with 4y equals -x plus 3. Now I need to get rid of that 4 next to my y. So I'm going to divide all sides by 4. So I'm left with y equals -1/4 x plus 3/4. So my slope in line B is -1/4. In line C, we have the same thing. Rearranging everything. So I'm going to move over what? My 2x. And this is negative, so it's going to be now positive 2x. I'm adding positive 2x to all sides. I'm left with -8y equals 2x plus 16. Now I'm going to divide by -8, which becomes y equals -1/4 x minus 2. What is my slope? -1/4. So just by determining here, I'm able to see that I have parallel lines. B and C are parallel, correct? And what else? What's the reciprocals? Negative reciprocals. I have a negative and a positive. So what is it? A and B are going to be what? A and B are perpendicular. And what else? A and C are also perpendicular. We're going to write an example for an equation of a perpendicular line. So we recall a perpendicular line has to have what? Reciprocal slopes, okay? So one positive and one negative slope, but be reciprocal, okay? So here we have our points. Here we have our points, which is -3 and 1. This is x and this is y. Our first line is y equals 1/2 x plus 3. We're solving for the second line. I know I'm going to start with y. This is going to help us determine what is our slope. So we know that my slope is half. What is the negative reciprocal of this? It's going to be, the reciprocal itself is 2 over 1, but the negative will be -2. So it's going to be -2x, and now we need to solve for our y-intercept. So again, you could use your slope-intercept form or your point-slope formula. Y equals mx plus b. I'm going to use the slope-intercept. Y is what? 1 equals, and my m is -2. This line, the line given to us, only really helps us determine our slope. But we're really using everything from our second line. -2. X is -3 plus b. That's what we're solving for. So 1 equals -2 times -3 gives me +6 plus b. I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides, and I'm left with -5 equals b. So my new line is going to be the y-intercept, which is -5. Here we're just going to do some examples. We have to determine line A passes through these points, line B passes through another point, and we need to determine, are they parallel? So we know that A is what? -5, 3, and 6, and 1. Our slope. So our slope is going to be, for line A, -1 minus 3 over -6 minus -5, correct? So we're going to have -1 minus 3 gives me -4, and -6 minus -5 gives me -1. This simplified gives me m is 4. In B, we have -7 minus -2 over 2 minus 3. -7 minus -2 gives me -5, and 2 minus 3 gives me -1. Simplify, this gives me 5. Are my lines parallel? No parallel lines. On example 2, question 2, write an equation of the line that passes through 4, 2 parallel. So we know my first line is y equals 1/4 x plus 1. My line 2, automatically, I know it's parallel, needs to have the same slope. So it's going to be 1/4 x. Now I need to solve for my y-intercept. So I'm going to have y equals mx plus b, where y is 2 equals m, which is 1/4, times -4 for my x plus b. 2 equals, what is 1 times -4 is -4 divided by 4 gives me -1 plus b. Now I'm solving for b, so I'm going to add 1 to both sides. 2 plus 1 is 3, so my b gives me 3. So my new line is going to be +3 for my y-intercept. Example 3, determine the lines have parallel or perpendicular. So I'm going to first find my slope. In A, I have to rearrange everything because it's in standard format. So I'm going to have, if you arrange it, I'm going to be left with 6y equals -2x, because I moved it to the other side, minus 3. I'm going to divide by 6. So I'm left with y equals -1/3 x minus 2. So my slope for line A is going to be -1/3. My slope for line B is, it's given to me, 3. And finally, for line C, I have to rearrange again. So I'm going to have negative 6y equals negative 18x plus 9. Now I'm going to divide by negative 6 to all sides. So y equals negative 18 divided by negative 6 gives me 3x minus minus 3 over 2, correct? So my slope for line C gives me 3. So these are my 3 slopes. What do I have here? I can see that B and C are parallel, correct? And I can see that A and B are perpendicular, and what else? A and C are also perpendicular.